Thanks everyone for joining us today for Via Voices. I am delighted to be here today with our guest, Paul Zink, who is hailing to us here from Costa Rica. And I'll be interviewing him for some minutes here, and then subsequently there'll be a time for questions and answers, which you can post in the chat or ask live at the end of our question session. So my first question to Paul is about how he came to Costa Rica, because he's a person that I've known for many years, but one of those people that goes to some place and learns the language in such a manner that you would almost think he's Costa Rican. So I don't know, Paul, if you could share with us a bit about your process of arriving.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa, and really pleasure to be here. I guess to answer that question, it's kind of maybe a two-part answer. I did an internship in college. I went to Antioch College in Ohio, and one of my final internship was at Earth University, which is an interesting story. I guess I really wanted to learn about tropical agriculture and better my Spanish, and so I was a cinematographer in college and learning that, and I called up Earth University and they said, you can't come here, you're not an agriculture student. So I called up the foundation in Atlanta, Earth Foundation, and said, hey, I noticed your website has some really old videos. I'll give you some updated videos if you allow me to do an internship. And they said, okay. I said, okay, I call the college, let me know, the university. And so I was able to then do an internship at Earth University and kind of create my own curriculum because they didn't have any other interns like me before. So I just had a bike and a camera and rode around the university learning a little bit of everything and got to know Costa Rica and the Costa Rican people, and actually a lot of people from all over Latin America, because Earth has 44 countries that their students hail from. So I really got introduced to many different cultures at once, and then graduated college back in the States, continued thinking I was going to be a cinematographer until one day, actually I was working in New York City on the TV show The Good Wife, decided that I didn't want to work in that area anymore and moved down to Costa Rica full time. And so I got a one-way ticket, moved to Costa Rica 2011, and yeah, began to start planting out a piece of property that my mother had bought years earlier, but had not done much with it. So just grass. And yeah, one thing led to another, ended up becoming more of an expert than I had imagined in agroforestry and collecting fruit trees. It was sort of a passion, hobby turned into a career. And yeah, that's how I ended up staying in Costa Rica.
And maybe I'm thinking if you could share a little bit with us about agroforestry, because not a lot of people maybe are familiar kind of with that. It's actually a pretty well-developed field, but a lot of people don't know about it.
Sure. Yeah. Agroforestry, traditional or conventional agriculture is one crop. They try their hardest to eliminate all the species and then plant just the one they want. And so agroforestry is the opposite, and it tries to incorporate many different species while producing food. So agriculture, forestry, it's a polyculture system with many different layers. So from the ground, you have root crops, then you have ground covers, then you have bushes, smaller trees, larger trees, canopy, some towering palm species and vines. So many different layers in the same agricultural system.
And I guess I ask just another kind of more personal question about how did that happen? I mean, as far as how did that interest come to you? I mean, it was from that Earth internship, or, I mean, even to go to Earth, how did you have that draw, I guess, from New York? I know you lived in New York, so.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was just fascinated with, okay, I guess I could start with saying I was diagnosed with allergies since I was a young boy, 3 years old. I was allergic to many, many things. And so ever since I can remember, age 9, I would be in a supermarket reading the ingredients on what I'm about to eat and being confused by what all these ingredients are. And so that kind of, I became a foodie by default because of that. And then that grew into a curiosity. Where do these ingredients come from? How are they grown? Because in New York, they're just at a supermarket. I never, maybe, at most, I picked an apple, right? But nothing else. And so I decided I wanted to learn where the food comes from. I went to New Zealand, did an internship, hitchhiking, working on farms, part of the WOOF program. Same in Japan. I went to do that in Spain a little bit, and throughout the States, different farms, North Carolina, California, and Vermont. And out of all the different farms, trees, the ones that had trees just seemed to make the most sense. And the least amount of labor and the most amount of output involved trees and agroforestry. And then I hadn't explored the tropics yet. And so for my last internship, I wanted to go somewhere in the tropics, and I heard about Earth University somehow, and I just thought that would be an ideal way to learn about tropical ag, because it's kind of like the Harvard of tropical agriculture schools. And um, so that's where my interest started, and learned a lot there.
And I'm wondering too, because I also have a long history with Earth, all the way back to the founding of it, when I was myself living in Guatemala and working down there. And I met the founder of Earth, who invited me to come see the campus when it was just a finca house. And so I've kind of tracked the development of Earth over the years, but I thought maybe you could share a little bit, a little more about Earth and what it is, and kind of what their vision is there, what they're doing there.
Sure, I can try. Jose Zaglul, your friend and the creator of Earth, his dream was to have a place where the leaders of tomorrow can learn the best practices for agriculture in the tropics, but also learn how to be entrepreneurs and leaders in their community. And so he had this dream to create the university. I think the acronym, if I can get it right, is EARTH, Earth Escuela de Agricultura de Región Trópico Húmedo. It's the agricultural school of the tropical humid region. And they've got funding from the USAID, built this amazing campus on a banana plantation. Rather than eliminating the banana plantation, they decided to keep it and have the proceeds from the sales of those bananas go back to the students' scholarships. I believe 80% of the students are on full or partial scholarship. Is my connection okay?
Yeah, it's occasionally a little choppy, but it's good. Okay. I think that's hanging in there.
Okay. So yeah, the goal was to have a space for students to be able to learn best practices for tropical agriculture, and they've created this amazing campus where they have students from 44 plus countries around the world come and learn and get a 4-star, really high-end education, and then can go back to their communities and spread that information. And yeah.
I know that one of the things I was so impressed with and I think they're continuing to do this, some of the particular scholarships they have also are for women agricultural folk. And, they'll recruit students from like the highlands of Guatemala. And with the support of scholarships, a lot of young people with no access to higher education are invited there. So yeah, I think it's an amazing location and concept. Well, I know I also wanted to kind of move on to what you all have been doing because, some ways I've kind of watched the progress of it, but I know the first thing that I was really taken with was the development of these products that you're working with. And I thought if you can kind of explain the whole system of how you are, developing the output and the products, and just sort of explain to us all about the programs.
Sure. I guess a bit more specific with the programs. There's Jungle Foods, Jungle Project. I'm not sure which one you want me to start with.
Well, maybe start with Jungle Project and then tell us more about Jungle Foods after.
Okay. So in my research and exploration of agroforestry and best practices for agriculture, I found breadfruit. Breadfruit, if anyone's not heard of it, breadfruit is a large tropical tree that produces cannonball-sized starchy balls of it's like imagine a big potato on a tree. That's kind of easy way to describe it. And one tree can feed a family of 4 for 70 years. And I was very curious why this tree is not more well known. Why isn't it in the markets? How are there people starving? I was also researching a lot of what's wrong with the world. There's malnutrition and hunger. There's devastation happening across the world in terms of the progress in agriculture, deforestation, monocultures, and the chemical warfare that's happening. And so breadfruit and agroforestry seem to fix a lot of these problems, or could help mitigate many of these issues. And so I went down the rabbit hole of learning more about breadfruit, and there's an issue with the reproduction of it because it's a seedless fruit, and so to reproduce it, it's very slow and painstaking. There's a new breakthrough technology that allows you to propagate it in mass. It's called in vitro tissue culture, and it's just basically micro clones of the plant and just little miniature cuttings. And so now we can produce thousands in a laboratory and send them around the world. And so around that time, I started working with my partner Gustavo Angulo. He was a student at Earth University, and he and I worked together to get breadfruit planted at Earth, because I was very aware that we need to have more research done on breadfruit in order for it to become a crop. Go from a backyard tree to a crop, there needs to be research on how much it produces per hectare. So Gustavo and I set out to get the first ever large-scale breadfruit agroforestry plantation planted and started at Earth University, which we were able to do right before he graduated. And so we got hundreds of trees planted right now they're massive producing trees, and we'd love to have people come down and check those out, because it's quite something to be in a forest of breadfruit and cacao and hardwoods and citrus. So that was our first step. And then when Gustavo graduated Earth, and he said, Paul, we got to plant some trees in the communities outside of the academic bubble now. that started. Now we need to do that. So we started for about 9 months to a year. We went to different communities and asked farmers, farming groups, would you plant breadfruit? What are your needs? Would this be helpful? And unanimously, all the communities pretty much had the same answer. Said, who's going to buy it? We'll plant it. But I have one tree in my backyard and I can't eat 90% of the fruit. It's so productive. So we took a step back and realized we need to find a way to create a market for these farmers. We can't just go around and handing out trees. We could show them how to plant it, how to grow it, but it's not going to do anything unless they're going to be able to sell it. And they'll cut it down and plant the next crop that we'll be able to sell. So we started Jungle Foods brand to be able to buy the product from them, process and connect with processing plants that can turn it into different products, and then connect it with the market. And then the proceeds of those sales of that would be able to pay for the trees and the training that's needed to get them out there. So it's been 7 years now, and we have a hybrid nonprofit and for-profit. Jungle Project is the nonprofit, and that does all the trees and training and research. And then Jungle Foods is the for-profit brand that purchases the product and secures the market for the farmers, which they really, really need.
So tell us a little bit about what is then the products? I mean, what does breadfruit produce? I mean, I know my Honduran friend here staying with me, she said, oh, well, we just slice it up and fry it. But I know there are a lot of other uses. So
that's a great question. It's about as versatile as a potato. And so anything you can do with a potato, you can do with breadfruit. You can make chips, you can make flour, you can make gnocchis, you can make, so we've made anything, you name it, we've probably made it. Tortillas, we've made empanadas, we've made pupusas, pasta, spaghetti. We started out making chips. That was the first thing, but then we wasn't really aligned with our mission with healthy food and healthy communities. So we pivoted and made flour, and that flour is much more versatile in the sense we can now take a sack of flour, send it to different parts of the world, different factories, and make pasta or tortillas. Depends on what we're looking for. So that's what we're started with. We called it Jungle Foods, Jungle Project, and not Breadfruit Company, because it's about agroforestry. And so we're starting with breadfruit, but we're also having the works cacao and different products that are growing in these agroforestry systems that trying to bring light to underutilized crops.
Mm-hmm. And we have a question here about the nutritional profile of breadfruit. I do know that it's highly nutritious, but I don't know the specifics of that.
Sure. Yeah, it's much more nutritious than, let's say, cassava. It has twice as much protein as rice, 4 times as much than wheat. It's extremely good fiber, has a lot of very high content of dietary fiber. And so it's really good for your heart. It's a complex carbohydrate, so that it does, in other words, it doesn't break down easily in your system like a simple carbohydrate, which would then spike your glycemic index. It breaks down, it's like a slow release energy. And so you feel satiated all day by eating a little bit of it. And people who are trying to stay away from simple carbs like wheat and rice, if they eat breadfruit, their energy levels are maintained throughout the day. It has a lot of potassium and minerals and amino acids. It's a very nutritious product. And also kind of a subtle, almost, it doesn't have much flavor, so you can be turned into anything. It takes on the flavor of other things really easily. And it's a great white flour. For a gluten-free flour, you usually get these kind of gritty or the almond flour can be a lot of flavor. Breadfruit is very versatile in that sense that it's white and fluffy, light and smooth, and yeah, so it's very special.
And another question here about the product was about the product is, can you ferment it or make alcohol, or can it be used as a fuel alternative?
Probably it's, there for a fuel alternative, but yes, it can be made into alcohol. There is a vodka brand called Mutiny Vodka that is, I think, is out of Barbados, I believe. It's a Caribbean island. I'm not sure exactly which island, but yeah, they're making a vodka out of it, and yeah. Traditionally, to answer the first part of your question, traditionally it was fermented in the forests of Polynesia and Micronesia. The way they would preserve it would be there'd be lots of it ripe at once, and in a pit they would put all the ripe fruit and put banana leaves in the bottom and above it, and after about a month it would be fermented like sourdough, and everyone in the community could come and grab a handful, put it in the oven, and it would it would rise like bread, and that's kind of where it got its name from.
Oh, how interesting. That part I didn't know. I didn't know I didn't know the history there of that. The other thing I was really sort of interested to learn more about are these connections that you've made. And so there's like the connections for the nonprofit work. Maybe if you could speak to that first, but then also the connections for the products. So maybe if you could speak to how you're getting organized to expand the program.
Sure, yeah. There's a lot to be done. And so we've made connections with, on the nonprofit side, to raise awareness. We've made a connection with Kiss the Ground. So it's a nonprofit based out of California that's done a lot of great work in getting the world to know what regenerative agriculture is, and so we're working with them on raising awareness, and then on raising funds and training farmers and doing that work on the ground. We're working very closely with Sustainable Harvest International, which has 23 years of experience working in Central America, specifically in Panama, Honduras, and Belize, and they've helped farmers convert from a monoculture, chemical rich agricultural system to, I think, at least 23 crops and organic agriculture systems, and diversifying the farmers' income and diets. And so we're combining their experience with our breadfruit training program that we've created. And yeah, it's a great marriage of the two programs, kind of the tree program, and we're currently raising funds for that. So if anyone wants to go to sustainableharvest.com/tree gift or jungleproject.com, you can learn more about that. And for the jungle food side, we've been connecting with different markets and the product. The main success story we have right now to talk about that is Patagonia's sister company. They started Patagonia Provisions. They're a company that's dedicated to promoting regenerative organic agriculture-based products, and they were looking for what's one of the most ecological carbohydrates in the world. They zeroed in on breadfruit, and our missions aligned perfectly. So we're selling them breadfruit flour, and they're making a cracker out of it, which I have actually a box here I could show. Just pretty exciting. Oh, doesn't work with the
Might not work.
But yeah, it's the first breadfruit product to go national in the United States, which is really exciting. And they launched last year, and they have an evergreen campaign. A lot of information on their website about it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Because I think probably folks that may listen would like to know where they can get things, for where they can try it. So that's sort of another aspect here. We're seeing some other programs, and maybe we can do this subsequently, but there's a question here about you sharing the listing of the programs and internships you did. So maybe if you send those to me offline, we can get that list to our interested person here. And
Sure.
and then another thing, a few more questions too. There's a question here about agroforestry in the US, and if you know of programs operating in the US. They probably wouldn't be having breadfruit because it's tropical, but
Um, I guess the US does encompass Hawaii, and I can answer to that. The Breadfruit Institute has been working for the past 30, almost maybe 40 years now, at the National Tropical Botanical Garden under Diane Ragoni's care, and she has created the Breadfruit Institute, and with help with Patagonia, a couple years ago, they created the Breadfruit Agroforestry model there that they're showing. You can go and check it out right now. And they're producing a bunch of different information about agroforestry practices. For temperate region agroforestry, I would not be able to talk on that too much, since I've been here in the tropics in Costa Rica for past decade, diving deep into this part. But yeah, there are some programs I heard with chestnut in the Midwest, and but I'm not the person to talk on it.
I would just share with those interested that the person that I've read some from is a guy named Mark Shepard, and he is in Wisconsin. And you're exactly on. He's doing kind of agroforestry projects with chestnuts. So the top canopy product is chestnuts, but then it's also this layered production. And his goal, I think, was to not do any annual planting. And so I think he every 3 years regenerates certain things on his farm, but for the most part, he just basically harvests. That's kind of the nature of agroforestry too, I think, is that you develop a system that is really a simpler harvest concept. So I do know about, so I can't remember the name of his book, but he's written one about agroforestry, and his name is Mark Shepard. So for those interested in that. I also see a question here. Has anyone made breadfruit pasta?
Yes, we're making breadfruit pasta. Actually, we have penne and spaghetti, and I don't eat regular pasta anymore. And we're currently looking to expand because we're selling it nationally in Costa Rica, and we'd love to get it to the U.S. market. That's our plan.
Well, I do know that Earth has been selling for some years now some of their banana production at Whole Foods. So maybe there's a channel there to get it into the Whole Foods markets, because that could be an interesting connection. Well, another thing I wanted to just mention, and I thought if I would maybe put her a little bit on the spot, but I wondered if Joanna on our staff, who journeyed with me to Costa Rica, might say something about her trip and her experience down there with breadfruit.
Sure, it was a while ago, but it's still pretty fresh in my mind. I mean, first of all, Costa Rica, if you all haven't been there, is amazing on so many levels, not the least of which is the overall mindset of everybody that we at least met who really believed in sustainability. And there's just such an overwhelming current of eco-friendly and eco-minded things happening there. It was actually really, really inspiring to see that, because you don't find that everywhere, but Costa Rica really seems to have it infused into so many of the things that people are doing there, whether it's tourism or agroforestry or whatever. Everybody seems, it's very in front of mind to a lot of people. So that really stood out. The breadfruit tours that we did were very cool. I had never heard of breadfruit before that, and it was really impressive and astounding. And I put in the comments, like, it's amazing that this product is just not known worldwide, because it is so amazing, not just in the amount that it can produce, but in the nutritional value. And I mean, it's just so stellar. It's like the way that quinoa has sort of taken over the world. It feels like breadfruit should be the next big thing. So I hope that all of your efforts are productive, and that we can see more breadfruit products here in the United States, at least, because I think people would really, really benefit from it. So congratulations on all that you're doing.
I see here another question about if you know from the history of breadfruit in Costa Rica, if it was shunned by the Europeans who originally came to Costa Rica, like they did with a lot of the indigenous foods in Mexico. I mean, I know right now amaranth is making quite a resurgence in Mexico, but it was shunned by the Europeans.
Quite the opposite, actually. Well, breadfruit is not native to Central America. It's native to Micronesia, Polynesia area of the world. So Tahiti, Fiji, Hawaii, those islands. And when I believe it was Captain Cook had researched it, and word got back to England that there was this amazing fruit, this breadfruit that existed that could feed people in large amounts. So Captain Bligh set out years later to go and collect these infamous breadfruit trees in Tahiti, and was employed to plant them in Jamaica to feed the enslaved peoples of the sugarcane industry that they had going at the time. And so they brought the breadfruit trees all the way over. There's actually a whole movie on it. If you want to, Mel Gibson was back in the long time ago, called Mutiny on the Bounty, and where the trees were thrown off into the water, and so was the captain. And the captain ended up being able to go back 2 years later and complete the mission and get breadfruit trees back to Jamaica and to many of the Caribbean islands. And so it has that thought that it was meant to feed enslaved people, but it was actually ended up being a tool for independence for the there was maybe 10 or 15 years before there was enough breadfruit for it to start to feed people, but then slavery was abolished. And so then the newly freed slaves were able to take the trees and go off onto a piece of land and plant it and feed them and their family. And so it was a tool for independence instead of a tool to feed the slave industry. So yeah, it then was brought throughout all the Caribbean islands as folks immigrated out of Jamaica and into the other countries. All, Honduras and Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Panama all have Caribbean waters, and there are folks there that settle down with the breadfruit tree. So it's part of the culture throughout the Caribbean in a big way, and also in many other parts of the world. You go to Mauritius Islands, Madagascar, you'll find breadfruit, and there's a breadfruit island off the coast of West Africa. I'm forgetting the name of, but more breadfruit than you can see other trees sometimes. And so it's kind of gotten to around the whole tropical nations, remaining tropical nations, and yeah, to kind of answer a little bit more of why isn't it everywhere? Why isn't it in markets? Why haven't we never heard of it? This amazing fruit. It's too good to be true, right? So it's, like I said before, that it's not easily propagated. It takes a long time to plant one. It's just been a backyard tree. You never see a plantation of it, really, until recently. Now we're able to propagate it, and there's more organization on that side. And then the processing of it. The fruit can ripen within 2 days after being harvested. So it needs to be processed quite quickly. It's not like a banana that can sit in a container for weeks or months. It needs to be processed quickly. So the value added part of this whole supply chain is very important, and which Jungle Foods has been pioneering.
That's fantastic, amazing history. Something that I would never have thought about, actually. But I also wanted to sort of going back to the development of these farms, wondering about the timing it takes. So if you like maybe just speak a little bit more in detail about like the training and then the timing it takes to actually have a productive harvest, or a productive number of trees.
It's both quick and also takes its time. I mean, in terms of trees, it's quite quick. They grow fast. 3 years, they'll produce their first fruit. I'd say by year 5, they're producing a good amount, and 7 at its kind of, I wouldn't say peaks, because the trees can tend to grow and grow and grow and produce more and more. And so, but having a pruned tree at year 7 and maintaining that production is a good estimate that we have to be a good medium. So yeah, 7 years, I'd say. And then the training of the farmers. So what we do is, rather than just handing the trees to them and walking away and saying, we'll show up when the fruit's ready, we plant the trees, we subsidize the trees for the farmers. So they don't have, because they can't afford to pay full for the trees sometimes. So we subsidize the trees in exchange for right of first refusal of the fruit. And also we offer free of charge training process. So it's both like a 2-part thing. We ask them what they need more of, and we say this is some of the essentials that we like. And so pruning techniques, post-harvest techniques, fertilizing techniques. All the farmers want to go organic. They would love to. They just don't have the tools or know-how. And so we have been able to synthesize the teachings that we've learned, Gustavo and I, at Earth University, and bring it to these farming communities in a much more digestible, easy way to apply right away. And say the farmers, they really want to learn more about microorganism tea, and so we'll make a specific course just for that, because everyone had voiced their opinion that they really want that. And so we do both, listening to the communities and showing what we've learned are the best techniques. And we've been able to pay been grassroots, pay this out of the small profits we've made from selling the product, and get gas in the car and go back to the communities and continue the training. And it's been a lot of work, a lot of passion. But we have a model now that we'd love to expand and grow, because there's so many other farmers that really need this type of program, and we didn't want to grow it too big before we were sure of what we're doing. And so we've spent the past 7 years, it was really 5 years program that we started, and 2 years prior to that doing research and learning. But it's been 5 years the trees were in the ground with 2 communities that you, Elisa, and Joanna, and many others from your team were able to visit. And you can see, I guess the drastic change from before to now is big. But you can tell from talking to these folks that they're really excited about what they're doing and want to continue, and they see the potential that it has for not just for them, but for their kids and their grandkids.
And like, I know we visited, I think 3 different farms, but I guess my question on like a just sort of a typical farm would be, how many trees would they then be having? I mean, how, what would like maybe the production be for that farmer? And then in terms of, added value to his sales, or I mean, I remember some of the farms were small, so they
Mhm.
wasn't like hundreds of trees. It was.
Sure. Yeah. So for an agroforestry system, leaving space between the breadfruits for cacao, hardwoods, citrus, bananas, any other crops that they'd like to be growing, we calculated it's about 25 trees per acre or 60 trees per hectare is a breadfruit. And then all the other companion plants and trees fit in between those.
That's so cool. Another question we have here is if you've had any chefs take up exploring with breadfruit.
Yes, there's been a few different cases. Well, I guess I can speak for Costa Rica. Many chefs have taken breadfruit and played with it and have incorporated it into their menu. Um, I know Gordon Ramsay went to Hawaii and played with breadfruit and was pretty into it. I'd like to get more chefs excited about it. And there was a head chef at Google that last year we had made 2019 made pancakes for him out of the flour, and he was very excited and going to be incorporating that into the menu. And then the corporate cafes and cafeterias closed because of COVID, so that's on hold. But there's definitely room for more chefs to get excited and to play with it because it's so versatile. If we can get fresh fruit into their hands, I'm sure they'd be really happy. And also the flour, they'd be very, very happy. I'd love to get Daniel Hume from 11 Medicine Park excited about it because he's going all vegan when he reopens in June 12th. So if anyone has a connection with Daniel Hume and like to get him some of our breadfruit flour, please let me know.
Yeah, I want to be sure everybody has your info too they could just contact you at your email.
Sure.
Okay. And it's Paul right? Paul, is it? Tell me your
Paul at jungleproject.com.
Yeah, Paul. There we go. So everybody can stay in touch. And then the sort of last thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is, and our hope, of course, is with some of the opening up of, I'll say, the world right now, at least it seems here in California, like things are starting to open up from the pandemic. And I know it's potentially slower in other spots, but I think that we're very hopeful that in the course of this coming year, we'll be ramping up again to offer trips and tours and visits. And I think on our hope for list is a trip to return to Costa Rica. So I know the journey we had, I have to say, was, to me, just, I know it was colleagues of yours that organized for us. And one of the things that is unforgettable is to visit these farms, and the way that you're received and the hosting of I mean, I had some of the best meals I think I've ever had on these farms in Costa Rica. And, not to mention that you're in the midst of the jungle and it's absolutely beautiful, and you're being hosted by wonderful local people that go out of their way to make sure that you're comfortable and enjoying their small farm or their small house or whatever. So it would be another opportunity to travel with, with us, or with, you could also, of course, reach out if you're not a group on your own to the Jungle Project folks through Paul, and go for a visit, because it's really, really well worth your effort to learn about these projects. And I hope we'll have some people interested either from here or on our recording, and have them reach out to you. And then as well, I'm hoping that we'll have some interest in organizing another journey down to visit your work and see the wonders of Costa Rica. So really, thank you for getting on with us today. And I do know that next week, I think Rigo will be hosting one of the artists from Chicano Park, Patricia Cruz. And we'll look forward to that experience. If there are any other questions for Paul, you could just raise them up here or in the chat and we'll. Well, if not, thank you all for coming on to Via Voices this June 1st. We're into a new era here in San Diego. And I hope we'll be seeing you soon sometime this year, Paul.
Looking forward to it, Lisa. Thank you so much.